So this is probably a good time to talk about selection layer strategy. When do you make these selection layers? And for something tricky like the moss, how do you go about it? Well, when we look at the final result here, certain shapes are going to be easy to trace. Something like this yellow stripe at the bottom, even in a totally finished image like this one, is just going to be easy. You could use the pen tool, you can trace along the edge, very easy to follow. So for something like that, you could do it at the beginning, you could do it at the end, it doesn't really matter. Something like this text right here is kind of a pain to trace, or you could, but it'd be a lot easier to just use your text element right when you created it. Because right now it's been long flattened into my image. But earlier on, I literally just made text, kind of got it in the right position. I probably rasterized it so that I could transform it into the right perspective. And way before I integrated it from a color standpoint, I still had it as its own layer. This is a good moment to just save a safe copy. Put it in your selection layers, hide it, forget about it. Because then when you do the actual painting over top and you kind of integrate it and you eventually flatten it, it doesn't matter because when you placed it originally, you just saved yourself a copy. So for many elements, really that's the easiest way to make a selection layer is just, if you think this is going to be useful later, save a copy, put it in your selection layers group, forget about it. But there are some elements that take an extra step, and the moss is a great example. Because the moss, when it's fully integrated into the image, is really tricky to isolate. Because here it's very low contrast to its surroundings. Over here it's especially low contrast. I'd have a really hard time making a selection that's just moss shaped. So this is something that's much easier to do earlier on in the process. Here we have an earlier stage of the painting, and this is when I've just applied the 3 faces worth of photo overlay. You can see this is before and this is after. And right now it's set to the overlay blending mode. Well, the actual photo elements just look like this. And I'd argue that this is the moment when they are easiest to isolate, because right now they have no lighting on them. The colors are high contrast. This is as easy as it's going to get. Now, if you bought the collection, the next series is all about modifying photos. So I'm not going to go into it too much here, but just know that Photoshop has lots of tools to isolate photographic details. If what I want here is essentially just the green stuff, a quick and easy way would be to do color range and then to kind of pick all the areas of green and then change this fuzziness to look pretty good. And there I have a selection. Now, how you finesse this, that's where the real skill comes into play. But know that Photoshop's tools all rely on contrast, as in being able to identify what's moss versus what's not moss is a lot easier when it's unlit like this. But you end up with a selection like this one, which I'll then make just a new layer, do a paint bucket fill, something usually kind of color coded to match. There we go. Beautiful selection. It's also important to name it, so I would call this one moss. Usually I color code it red and then I hide it. And that's it. So as you continue on your painting, you carry on just like you were, but you know that as long as the moss doesn't move, at any point moving forward, you can control click on that selection layer you made and you're good to go. It's really all a matter of just catching it before it gets too integrated.